Because like I guess in the past we talked about what we do for sustainability, but is there just one thing that you'd like to do for just to make a difference in sustainability on Earth Day? So here, let me stop sharing now. So again, the question in here, let's see if I can put it in the chat. Okay, so now I'll stop sharing so we can see each other. Okay, so the question is in the chat. So how about we start with Sean?
Okay, so my wife's on the sustainability committee for WES, and so she's coordinated a like a native tree planting event. So I'll be taking place in that.
Oh, cool. Cool. How about Ed McGurgy?
Ed.
Yeah, that Ed. We have
Okay.
two different things we're going to be doing. We have a tree giveaway that 50 trees that we're working with John Hines Refuge on that they're going to be giving away at Catania Park. Then the other thing we're going to be working on is we're still working with Glen Providence Park on stabilizing their stream banks. And so we have lots of things going on, but that was a big one, the tree handout.
Oh, nice, nice. Let's see. Mark?
We're going to have a tree planting at Catania Park on the 24th of April. And the real cool thing about this, we're going to have some youngsters from the Ridley Soccer Organization, Ridley AA, that are going to participate. 15 native trees, bare root, that we're going to be planting along the athletic field, or the exterior of the athletic field. We're also co-sponsoring an e-waste collection with the Pennsylvania Resources Council on April 29th. They're not on Earth Day, but they're close enough.
Right.
And we're working also with Karen from Ed's agency to help out with the Johns Hine Refuge with the tree giveaway on the 24th as well.
Awesome. How about Becca?
Sorry, I'm switching stations currently.
Oh.
So I don't have hard plans of like an organized event for Earth Day. But one thing I try to do in my community every once in a while is I live right down the road from Clayton Park, and the one outer street always has really bad trash residue. So a couple times a season, as long as the weather is okay, I'll try to go down and pick up trash just because I'm close enough to walk it back to my house to dispose of.
Oh, I like that. David, director?
Well, we don't have any specific plans for Earth Day itself, although I will be taking part in the e-waste collection. Thank you very much. I guess that was Mark, or was that Ed? Anyway, whoever is doing that, thank you very much. We will indeed take part in that. But one thing we are doing this year is as we continue working on landscaping in our yard, we are focusing on planting a lot of native species, both trees and shrubs and flowers, and supporting the local ecology.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Francine.
So I'm going to say my one thing personally that I'm going to do, and that is to stay away from fast food, takeout, and all that packaging that goes with it, and try to actually maybe initiate a single-use plastic diet from that day forward.
I like that phrasing. It's very catchy. A single-use diet. Elaine.
Hi, everyone. I am going to participate in the county activities, but on Earth Day itself, I have a board meeting for my nonprofit that day, which is an environmentally focused nonprofit. So I will be leading my directors to spending lots of money on protecting the environment.
Excellent. I like that. Howard.
So on that Saturday, I will actually be volunteering at one of the county's vaccination sites. But during that week, we are going to have a discussion with council to make sure we appropriately fund all of our sustainability activities in the 2022 budget.
Oh, very good. Jenny.
Yeah, so on Earth Day, I actually have a virtual event with my university's chapter of Engineers Without Borders, and they're all about community-based, community-led sustainable solutions. So it's a nice event to have on Earth Day.
Nice. Laura.
I believe I'll be with Howard vaccinating, or at least not, they won't allow me to vaccinate people, let's be real about this, but at least directing people at the vaccination station. The one thing that we did in terms of Earth Day, at least Earth Day related this year, is establish a new garden bed. And because I am not aware, I'll be the first one to admit it, but do have friends who are very eco-friendly and make sure that they plant flowers that will help the bee and butterfly populations that are still native to Pennsylvania. So we have a couple of those going into the ground.
Oh, nice. Scott?
I'll be camping with the
Oh,
Scouts.
there you are. I'm sorry, Scott, what did you say?
I'll be camping with the Scouts.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh. Let's see. How about Justin? Would you like to share?
Sure. So at DEP, we usually do a litter pickup, but since we're all still working virtually, it's do the litter pickup in your neighborhood. So I'll walk around and pick up some litter.
I love that. Let's see, Steve.
A couple of people in our climate group in Havertown read Nature's Best Hope, which is all about restoring habitats, and very, very critical of our obsession with lawns. And so a couple of us are going to rent, not on Tuesday, but on the weekend, there's a tool to take up part of your lawn, and we're going to convert part of our lawns to, native pollinators and kind of making them into like meadows.
Nice.
And, as like a couple families are going to do this. So, yeah.
Nice. Virginia, some of these people you'll be introduced to throughout the meeting, but Virginia.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Virginia. I'm with DEP. I actually implemented the virtual cleanup that Justin referred to, so I will also be participating in that.
Awesome. Mike Thompson.
Hi, everybody. I am Mike Thompson. I'm finding the button for my video. I'm an architect with KCBA. We'll be talking later on tonight. I am organizing a park cleanup for Earth Day next weekend, and separately organizing an Arbor Day event, which I think is the following weekend. So 2 parks in our local community that we'll be cleaning up and planting trees in.
Awesome. Mike Kelly.
Yes, hello. I'm the other Mike of KCBA Architects. As Mike would say, we're going to be speaking with you later. Every year in our office, we have 2 different offices. We spend the day looking at ways to reduce our power, turning lights off, making sure that we're going through and making sure that we have all of the, what do you call it, the things that turn off your screen when you're not working, screensavers and things like that that turn everything off, and just making sure in our little group that we're trying to be as sustainable as possible as we can in the office. So we have a list every year that we go through of initiatives just to remind everyone and keep ourselves on task for trying to be the best environmental stewards that we can be.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm not going to pronounce his name right. Costa?
So good evening, guys. My name is Kaustubh. I'm with Bureau Veritas. We are working with KCBA Architects, and we'll be presenting later on. So for Earth Day, typically we try to match up the events with Bring Your Kids to Work Day as well as Earth Day things. And historically, we have had camps over here where we would teach kids to used the K-cups as planters to start new plants and things like that. And last year we had an initiative by which all the coffee mugs are biodegradable in our office now, and trying to use the biodegradable plastic forks and things like that. So continue with that practice as we go along.
Nice. Connie Butler. Oh, Connie Butler.
Hi, everyone. So on Saturday next week, we will be doing our first household hazardous waste event to try to keep anything from ending up in the environment and in the waterways. And on Sunday, I'll be participating in Rutledge's Earth Day events.
Okay. Let's see. Warner, I'm not sure.
Yes.
What's your first name? I'm sorry.
Ed Warner.
Oh, Ed. Right, Ed. Sorry.
Thank
Sorry.
you. My wife and I are going to plant our vegetable garden. We do that every year.
Awesome. I really like that. And then, I'm sorry, Jay Bierling. I'm sorry, I don't remember your first name.
It's Jack Pearling.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
I recently moved. I used to live in Upper Darby, and we used to do cleanups around the school for Earth Day, where we would actually go like along the routes that the children would walk, and we'd pick up trash and everything on the route. So they didn't have to look at it going to school. I recently moved to Springfield, so I'm actually going to venture out on some of their trails here in Springfield. I saw them doing some work on the runoff of 320 about a week or two ago, and I might go and see where that ends up. So if I'm not in work on Monday, then I'm probably lost in Smedley Park or something.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody that I missed?
Linda?
Oh, Linda, please. Thank you.
You're on mute, Linda.
Sorry about that. So I'm definitely participating in the county's e-waste event. Looking forward to that for a while now, getting rid of some of that stuff. And then I guess April 22nd, I am, I'm registered for an online lecture at the Franklin Institute on megafires. I'm not sure if that, if that makes a difference in sustainability, but that's my plans for Earth Day.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you. And then just for me, a lot of you mentioned picking up litter, so that's what I plan on doing too.
Did Jenny, did you go?
She did, yeah.
How did I forget this?
Oh, that's okay.
Forgive me.
That's okay. Okay, so let me share my screen again. So go on to the next item on the agenda. Oh, okay. So we purposely made public comment just a part of the agenda today for the first time, but is there any public comment yet for those who are like checking it?
I haven't received anything. And I know we wanted to discuss a little bit how we want to pursue getting more public comment, but we do have we have an extended agenda tonight. Justin actually has a little bit more than 15 minutes, so maybe we could save that.
Okay. We can think about that for the future too, like
Absolutely.
how we want to get like more public comment.
Agreed.
How about the approval of the meeting minutes for the last meeting? Hopefully you had a chance to look them over. Oh, wait. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes?
I think there may be one thing at the top with the list of attendees. Councilmember Christine Ruther should be under county. I just realized she's under citizen or guest. I think that's correct. I mean, I know she's a council member.
I'll have to add her as another. Wait, I think I know how to do that. There you go. Okay. Okay. I'm in a meeting, but I'm okay. Okay. All right. So that's done. Okay. Any other comments?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as corrected.
Okay. Would someone second that?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, so moved. The meeting minutes from last month are approved. And thank you to Sean, as always, for doing the minutes. It's not easy.
Here, here.
So thank you for that. Okay, now for the Chief Sustainability Officer update. Francine.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. All righty, here we go. Okay, there we go. So I'd like to give an update on CPACE, the CPACE program, which is a clean energy program for local county businesses. We have actually moved forward with, of course, formally adopting the CPACE program. We passed a resolution through council on March 17th. We've drafted an SCF program administrator cooperation agreement. That is the firm, the nonprofit that is actually going to administer the program. We've drafted a statement of levy and lien. I'd like to give a shout out to our solicitor's office for making that happen. The next steps are to finalize the documents that are listed there, adopting the final program guidelines, communicating the program with the Delaware County commercial community. And CPACE legislation actually requires that any type of financing that is approved or is moving forward has to be posted to the CPACE website, and you'll find that under Delaware County, but there are other counties, of course, involved. So I wanted to share with you the current county energy management that I'm aware of, that since I've been here for about 2.5 months. I've met with Provident Energy, which is the county's energy procurement consultant. This firm is in Media, PA. They provided historical and current energy data for all of our buildings. The data was added to our Sustainability Commission shared folder under energy use and emissions for all of us to look at. It's a large spreadsheet with a ton of data. And this data was also shared with FCNA, which is the, with the FCNA consultant, KCBA, who is with us tonight. And Provident is attempting to enter this county energy and water data into EPA's portfolio manager so that we can generate our Energy Star baselines for all of our buildings, which is our starting point for figuring out our greenhouse gas emission baseline. Wanted to share with you that another wonderful Dvrpc program that we are participating in is the Regional Streetlight Procurement Program. And so Dvrpc is working with Bucks, Chester, Delaware, and Montgomery counties to try to convert a large number of streetlights, traffic signals, and other outdoor lighting equipment to LED. It's a turnkey program, and Dvrpc arranges the financing. They're arranging it for several municipalities. Delaware County is a part of that process to have the funding go to 3 of our townships. But this is tentative. It has not been set in stone yet. There are still some paperwork to go through to see that, make sure these go through at Eddystone, Trainer, and Chester City. So the next steps would be to draft and present an action item to our county council at the May 5th meeting, and to vote, have the council vote to enact the program on the May 19th meeting. These are tentative dates, and we have to make sure that all of the paperwork goes forward. Excuse me. The vehicle electrification plan. So we have purchased 15 vehicles. 4 of them have been received. The others are being held at the dealership until we have our infrastructure installed. The 4 vehicles that we're presently using, we're using the short-term electricity plug-ins for those vehicles, and that type of a charging program requires a long period of time to stay plugged in and does not give a huge amount of time for the vehicle to be used. So the infrastructure that we're trying to install, we have 3 fast charging EV stations that will be installed by July. They'll be at 3 locations: Fair Acres, Amber Street across from the Government Center, and Upper Darby parking lot on Wiltshire Road. The process for installing this is includes having a contract that was awarded on March 17th. And the contractor has to actually obtain permits from 3 townships, and that could take up to 45 days. The townships are listed here: Middletown, Mediaborough, and Upper Darby. And new electric service is required for these 3 sites. And so it takes time for these things to be installed. So that's why it's taking a little bit of time. Jack Beerling is here, and he's been doing a very good job of pushing this through and making sure we get the infrastructure installed. He's our Public Works Director. So, yes.
Francine, just a quick question here
Sure.
about the charging infrastructure.
Yes,
Is
sir.
there commercially available charging infrastructure that we could use in the short term and take delivery on the remaining vehicles?
I don't have a good answer for that. I'm not sure. So let me check. It sounds like there possibly could be, and I believe there is, but I'm not sure.
I would think there's something somewhere around 69th Street, for example, if we're talking Upper Darby. I'm not quite sure what there is here in the borough, but Swarthmore College, I believe, has, you know, some charging infrastructure. Possibly something out at Granite Run, there may also be infrastructure.
I really like that idea. So I'm not sure where I would find a catalog or a reservoir for that information, but I guess I could talk to the COG too. Beck is on here, and she has introduced me to the Council of Governments, who have all of the different municipalities, who maybe I could touch base with those folks, send out a query and ask.
I can possibly find out. Tesla generally lists not only superchargers, but they often show charger infrastructure that is not theirs. And some of the other vehicle manufacturers may as well. So I'll be happy to research that a little bit.
Thank you, David. That would be lovely, because that's a wonderful solution to get those vehicles moving. Thank you so much. So this brings me to a really cool endeavor we may be going on as a county. So this is a potential public-private partnership, and it really supports our sustainable living idea for Delaware County. So there is a company, Remco, who approached the county with this amazing idea. When I first saw the idea, I was blown away, but I wanted to make sure that we gave the opportunity for other companies, firms, even energy providers to see if they had any ability to provide what had been shared with us by this company called Remco. So we did a request for interest, and we received 5 responses to this. And none of them could even compare to what Remco brought to our county. And so I just wanted to share this with our group here, and share that there's an opportunity for us to work with this company to develop renewable energy, large-scale solar arrays in Delaware County, installing electric vehicle charging. I'm sorry. Okay. Installing electric vehicle charging stations throughout the county for both community use and for county use, and even creating a manufacturing facility that would employ and source locally EV chargers and solar panels, solar arrays. Now, these ideas are conceptual right now. They could change. But this was the idea that was brought to the county, very well fleshed out too, and very detailed. The next steps would be to develop a potential project pro forma through the Industrial Development Authority, asking the commission here for a member of our committee, or 2 or 3, to be included in the conversations that we're initiating with this company, to ask the questions and find out what's involved with this commitment. And determining how to move forward by way of a 180-day due diligence or exploration period, which is part of that pro forma with the IDA. So I wanted to bring this to the commission and share this information with you. I've only been here for 2.5 months, and this has been something that I have been looking at and really was very blown away, but I was skeptical at first. And so after doing a lot of vetting, I really would like to ask that someone from the commission join me in this process. And so I'd like to ask, is anyone here willing to be able to join me and this Remco for a series of meetings to discuss this? Any volunteers?
I'd be happy to. So certainly solar is a particular interest of mine, as is EV charging. So I'd be very interested in pursuing that option.
Awesome. Thank you. I will send invites for a series of meetings that are coming up. And if you can't make them, I can rearrange the dates. Laura is on the call from Commerce, and She has been instrumental in helping to move this forward in terms of just getting information, exploring the ideas, and seeing if the county can benefit from this. We want to make sure this is in the best interest of our county and to create a sustainable living environment here. So thank you, David. I can't see pictures. I'm presuming it's David.
I'd be interested as well, Francine.
Steve, right? I can't see. Okay, cool. So I have 2 participants here. Anyone else would like to be included in the conversation? Because it will require some meetings, a series of meetings.
Francine, are you talking about the ones that we already have established?
Yes.
Yeah.
For next week.
Those are not very movables, but I do believe the intent of
Say
this
again.
project.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I don't think those dates are very flexible at this juncture. I mean, we're sort of planning things weeks out in advance in order to be able to keep on track with this 180-day schedule for the project before us. But there is intent to, once we get through this due diligence period, I don't think it'll take 6 months, but I don't want to commit to a date now, that we would be asking for a joint informational session with the full Sustainability Commission and also council at the same time. So the idea is doing that in conjunction with REMCO to present to both the Sustainability Commission and Council.
Okay, well, I will present the dates that are already scheduled to David and to Steve and see if they are available. But if they can't make those dates, David, I see you talking and you're on mute. David, you're on mute. Oh, maybe he's talking to somebody else. Sorry. All right, I'm going to move forward because we have a huge agenda here. All right, I see. All right, thank you, Laura. All right, so KCBA is here. I usually like to give an update on our facility condition and needs assessment, but KCBA is going to be giving a presentation later to give the status of that and some more details. This is a long slide, and I just really wanted to give a capital improvement program update. So basically, our statement of need form was sent out to all of our departments. The request deadline is May 1st. We have a CIP steering committee meeting for May 6th to review those requests and to distribute to our subcommittees. And our goal is to have something to the capital budget committee by July 1st. There is a detail here that I could talk to for about 20 minutes, but I wanted to at least share it with you guys that the CIP administrative practice that we have been putting together has a section on capital assets and the value of those. And so the code indicates that a capital asset is something that is $500 or more. I would like to share with you guys that I'm trying to see if there's a possibility of changing that to $5,000 or more. And there are many reasons for that. And one of them really is about the amount of administrative burden that is placed upon, believe it or not, my office for processing very small capital assets that should be the responsibility of departments. I wanted to bring this to you guys, and there's much more conversation about that. This would have to go to council for a vote. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. Any questions about that? I'm so sorry. I'm kind of running through it because we have a lot of other folks. So I wanted to share, oh, yes.
If I could add, the reason for making the change is not only the fact that $500 is a burdensome amount, and it winds up that we then have to keep track of minor maintenance and repair items, but it also brings the capital asset program in alignment with the code, which requires that projects over $5,000 be independently listed. So it makes things more seamless and makes them flow better. It is a change to an ordinance, so it will require going through that process, including 2 readings. So it's a short-term burden on Francine, but it's a long-term benefit.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Howard, for explaining that a little further. I'm kind of rushing through. I'm excited about the speakers coming forward. Okay, just I think 2 more slides here. So I asked Linda Hill to provide me with, I said, is there anything you'd like to share with the Sustainability Commission regarding the work you're doing? She's doing a tremendous amount of work in planning and community development. I pulled out a few things here. I just wanted to share with you guys to see what's going on. Her office is hosting Delaware County Coastal Zone Task Force meeting on April 28th. Presenters include Penn State's Extension Master Watershed Stewards of Chester and Delaware County. She's holding the first task force meeting to guide development of the Return on the Environment report in coordination with Dvrpc. And this is a focus on providing a deeper understanding of the economic value of protected open space in Delaware County. She's collaborating with the PADEP on a small technical assistance brownfield grant on behalf of Darby Borough. And she held the first county's Green Space Task Force meeting to help define county's future role in open space and trails. And I know Council Member Elaine Schaefer, this is a very important project for her that she has spearheaded. But Linda, I just really wanted to share with the folks the amount of work you're doing in regards to sustainability.
Yeah, the office is very busy.
It really is. I'm very impressed with the amount of work and it's sustainability infused. So I just want to give an update on our Sustainability Commission summer intern. We received 12 applications. Our Human Resources Department is going to conduct preliminary phone interviews between now and April 21st. By the end of next week, we should have a short list. And then we will schedule some virtual Zoom interviews with myself and some other interested folks. And we anticipate hiring and onboarding by the end of May. And the Earth Days were already discussed by Mark and Ed. Thank you. Any questions?
Great update.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was a great update. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Francine, is CPACE, what is the timeline for that to come live?
Laura's here, and I could speak, but Laura probably would be best to check.
But technically, Steve, it is live. You know, with all it is basically we're waiting for the ink to dry on certain agreements with SEF. But of course, given the fact that there is, you know, if a considerable project was in development and in conversations with financiers, there's still a process to go through, as you all know. So that process would conceivably take approximately 45 days in order to get to the point of actually executing that tri-party agreement, which means that they could conceivably start now. SEF isn't going to necessarily reject having those conversations just because the ink isn't dry on the cooperation agreement yet. And we actually made updates to those documents. They're in SEF's hands right now. So I expect the turnaround to be next week. I don't think they're going to sit on it. They've wanted Delaware County for some time now. So we should be good. Trust me, Steve, you'll see confetti shooting off from media when it happens because I've been, you know, I've been dying for this for I don't know how long. Oh, I do know how long. October 31st, 2018.
That's great.
So.
Okay, any other questions for Francine? Okay, let's go back to the agenda. So next, Justin, if you'd like to speak a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, and I have a presentation. Here we go. There we go. So it's good to be back talking with folks at Delaware County. Good to see familiar faces. And I guess as Francine mentioned, I was a little overambitious, but in talking with her, she said the group is looking at doing sustainability planning and focusing on some efforts around including equity and environmental justice in the plan. So I might focus a little bit more on some of our general terms and terminology around environmental justice and things to think about. And I'll gloss over some of the work that DEP in specific is doing, but we're happy to come back, and I'll also share the presentation so that folks can look at the slides later. But so I'm going to start with some background on environmental justice, some of the definitions and the legal policy and statutes around environmental justice, the roots and the history of environmental justice and the science of disproportionate impacts, and then depending on time, might get into some of the work of the Office of Environmental Justice that we do. But I did want to say, just to frame the conversation on who we are at DEP, DEP is Pennsylvania's environmental regulatory agency with the mission to protect Pennsylvania's air, land, and water from pollution. And we do this through a series of program-specific bureaus. So water, which includes clean water, safe drinking water, waterways and wetlands, the Waste, Air, Radiation and Remediation Bureau, active and abandoned mines, oil and gas. And the way that most people at the county are going to interact with DEP is through the DEP regional office. The Southeast Regional Office is located in Norristown, and Virginia's on the line too, who's the Community Relations Coordinator. Also a great resource. And so here's the phone number, and I'm sure folks know how to get a hold of us. To take it to and look at environmental justice, I know one thing that is that there is no one set definition of environmental justice. And depending on who you're talking to, people think of it in different ways and at different scopes. So these are just a few definitions of environmental justice that are used. A lot of people rely on the US EPA definition, the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. And a lot of this relates to an executive order that was signed that codified environmental justice. At DEP, we don't have a definition, but our website does talk about environmental justice embodying the principle that communities and populations should not be disproportionately exposed to adverse environmental impacts. But then from the community side, the first People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit came up with 17 principles of environmental justice. And that was a multi-day summit where people really spoke about what they wanted to see, what environmental justice really meant, and came up with these 17 principles. And that's the way a lot of community organizations think about environmental justice, which is a lot more expansive than the way government agencies define it. And then at the bottom there, they're just, they show elements of a taxonomy of environmental justice and sort of things that are associated in other types of justice that are associated with environmental justice that are formulated by scholars and practitioners in the field. So even defining environmental justice isn't easy, you know, it's important to be inclusive even in how you define the scope of environmental justice when working on those efforts. And I know, just wanted to also share this graphic. I know people may have seen something like this similar before, but just to get to some key terms that are used in environmental justice, this graphic really helps illustrate them in a nice way, I think. So the goal of this, of these people is to see this baseball game. So the goal of DEP is to provide for a safe and healthy environment. But the goal for this is to see the baseball game. But people have different impediments to that based on sort of historical issues and issues that they're facing, which is shown through the sloping ground, where some people start out at a disadvantage just from where they're located, but also systematic barriers or problems that they have facing them from organizational barriers or rules and regulations. So those are represented by the increasing fence. And those are sort of systematic barriers that are stopping people from reaching their goal. If you treat everyone with equality, everyone receives equal resources. So everyone gets one box, and that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is able to achieve the goal. But if you work with equity, then you give everyone the resources they need to achieve the goal, wherever they're starting from and whatever barriers they face. You give them the resources they need in order to achieve that goal. But then, and that's equity. And then justice goes one step further to give people those resources they need, but then also works to help eliminate some of those systematic barriers so that in the future they might need fewer resources in order to achieve the goal. So that's sort of generally the term justice and how it's used. And when we talk about some of those historical inequities that people are talking about, there are lots of examples of historic inequities, but one of the most visual is redlining and the practice of setting districts to be places where people could invest or should not invest. And this is a map of the city of Chester. These quotes aren't from the city of Chester's map. Those quotes aren't available as far as I can find them. But you can see that, you know, in the New Deal, when people were creating these red line maps, they actively used race and class as ways to encourage further disinvestment in communities. It was very explicit and very much on the maps. This is a timeline of efforts to help improve that situation and improve some of those historical inequities. It's a timeline of federal and state government responses to encourage better environmental justice. And the items in red are things that Pennsylvania has done in particular around environmental justice. And I'll go into some more detail about some of the key items. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964, particularly Title VI, is a key sort of legal basis for non-discrimination and really helps form the basis of most cases that come up around environmental justice. And then from the environmental side, the environmental movements such as Earth Day. So the environmental movements from the 70s and 80s that led to things like the National Environmental Protection Act are key to incorporating environmental justice, the environment into the Civil Rights Act. And it was seen that laws weren't always equally applied everywhere. So these are some key elements of the environmental justice movement, which are community and activist led. But Warren County, North Carolina, in 1982, there was the siting of a landfill in a predominantly African American neighborhood, and that became the genesis of the term environmental racism and a big catalyst for the environmental justice movement. The United Church of Christ study really helped put some numbers and data around environmental racism and the environmental justice movement. During the first People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit in 1991, that's where those 17 principles of environmental justice were created. And then through activism, Bill Clinton signed an executive order in 1994 that mandated that each agency shall make achieving environmental justice part of its mission. And that executive order is still in effect. And then to take those national roots and really focus on the environmental justice movement in Pennsylvania, it really did start right there in Delaware County in the city of Chester. The city had multiple waste facilities, and it contained about 8% of the county's population, but 60% of the waste facilities. At the behest of the community, EPA conducted studies in the mid-90s with the assistance of folks at the Department of Environmental Protection. But in 1996, the Chester residents concerned for quality living filed a lawsuit under Title VI, claiming a discriminatory effect, as 70% of the city was African American. It reached the U.S. Supreme Court, but was declared moot when DEP denied the permit. But DEP did move forward with the creation of an environmental justice working group that released recommendations in 2001 that led to the creation of the Office of Environmental Justice and DEP's environmental justice policy. So also, when thinking about the science of disproportionate environmental impact, there are three main drivers to consider. The built environment, so where facilities are located, how the structure of the built environment is, the natural environment, which includes flooding or COVID, for example, and how that has disproportionate impacts on people, and then the social environment. People's access to healthcare and safe and healthy homes and things like that. So environmental injustice is a force multiplier, and you can see how people living near a facility that releases air air pollution, then their asthma is exacerbated, which then causes them to have increased healthcare effects, which then decreases their ability to live in a healthy and safe home. And so it just becomes a downward spiral. And there are sort of multiple empirical studies looking at a lot of this information that are researched, so on various topics, so we can help get information on particular research. And then from there, and again, I'll go through these really quickly, but just I'll share the slides afterwards because I want to leave time for any questions. But I go back into DEP's mission and talk a little bit about the goals of our Office of Environmental Justice and some of the work we do to integrate environmental justice into policies, such as our public participation policy, which we're currently in the process of updating and trying to get feedback on to make it a stronger environmental justice policy at the state level as much as we can. Francine had mentioned we're working with Linda and the County Planning Department on the Darby Borough Small Brownfields Technical Assistance Grant. So we just brought a consultant on board for that, but the county has already provided some great GIS resources to us that have really moved the project ahead very far, even before we get the consultant on board and get them to focus a little bit more on some of the resources that they can bring. Delaware County Community College also is one of several community colleges that offers a training program for drinking water and wastewater operators. It's a good career that earns a living wage that people are able to join with just a high school diploma and the certificate program. So it's a really great opportunity, and we're looking to bring that to the high school level at William Penn School District. The state is also looking to do Reg U rulemaking, and that process is moving forward. We also do outreach around the state and have done some with the city of Chester. We had a roundtable where lots of concern was expressed around air quality. And we work with the Chester Environmental Partnership to help get them more information on air quality from our staff and do training with a program for students at Chester Upland School District. The state also does climate action planning at the statewide level and has local climate action planning. In the current cohort of local climate action plans, I believe Upper Darby, Chadds Ford, and maybe Haverford are included in doing climate action plans through the local climate action plan effort. We have some tools available through the EJ area viewer, where you can see certain facilities that are located in the county that as well as some demographic factors that are included. But since you're in the Southeast region, Dvrpc's equity analysis tool is a really great tool to be able to look at even broader demographic characteristics and see where there might be environmental justice issues, and really how different census block groups relate to the average in the area. And then EPA also has a tool that includes a lot of those demographic information, but then also adds some environmental indicators, and you can compare census tracts with those statewide or nationally to see how various areas have different environmental burdens. And in general, as we go through the update, we're looking to try to include more environmental burden data in our analysis, in addition to the demographic data we include now. California has a great tool for this. And it really, to tie it back together, really does show that history of redlining. This map shows those census tracts outlined in the red lines are those that were redlined back in the 30s, and it shows that those are also still the census tracts with the highest environmental burden right now. And that's not only true in California. We don't have the Cal Enviro screen, but just looking at some of EPA's EJ screen data, you can see that this overlap still exists in a lot of communities, even those in Pennsylvania. They mapped Philadelphia related to diesel particulate matter and York City in proximity to hazardous waste, just showing that those factors are still in effect. We have a newsletter, so I have to put a pitch in for that, and then have my contact information. So I'll share this afterwards so that folks can have those links to those mapping resources and other things, and available to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Justin. That was extraordinarily helpful.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I thought it was outstanding. Thank you. We do have I guess a question in the chat. Was the permit that was denied the proposed autoclave? I guess that was in reference to something earlier in your presentation.
Yeah, so that permit in Chester, I don't know actually what the facility was that was denied. It would have been, 1996. So I'm not sure if that's the timing of that facility or not.
Does anyone else have any questions for Justin? I'm just blown away by it. I'm just thank you for being here to do this for us. Any questions for Justin?
It seems like in the redlined areas co-align with so many environmental crimes, whether they're official crimes or not. You have diesel, you have a lot of other forms of air quality, and you have lead exposure. Do you have a feel, or do people have a feel like in Chester, what is the most important issue in terms of their environment, the people that live there, in terms of all these things that people can put on maps?
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge. I mean, Chester is definitely facing a lot of issues, and one of those, 17 principles of environmental justice is to really let communities speak for themselves. So, as you do this work, as you get into sustainability planning, really try to do outreach to communities that might be harder to reach, that might not come to an average meeting, to really try to get their feedback on what their greatest concerns are. Like I said, when we did a roundtable, we heard a lot about air quality being a big concern in the city of Chester, both from the transportation of having the I-95 corridor running through it, as well as from the industrial facilities, concerns about what that meant for their health as far as asthma and other sort of diseases that come from having poor air quality. But, it's important to sort of hear directly from the community and make sure they have a part in the process.
And Steve, just to follow up on that, actually, later tonight, my wife's going to be participating in one of the candidates who's running in Chester is going to be talking about that issue in particular. And I think it's a waste to energy plant that is one of the main concerns in Chester that creates just a ton of pollution. So I can report back to the committee after that meeting later this evening.
That would be great, Sean. I'd love to know what data they have available in terms of air quality and where they're getting that from.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Hey, Justin, have you been invited to attend any of the Chester Delco environmental justice meetings?
I don't know if I have. I've been to the Chester Environmental Partnership, so I usually attend those meetings if that's the group you're talking about. But
I'm familiar with Chester Environmental Partnerships. It's different. And actually, I don't know if this is the same meeting that you were talking about, Sean, but at 7 o'clock in 4 minutes, there is one, and they usually conflicts with our meeting. Just started several months ago, and I'm just sharing that with everyone anyway, because I think it's a good opportunity where you can hear a lot of the issues. Again, centrally focused on Chester, but they're opening it up to all of Delaware County because they feel that a lot of their issues stem from the waste and other things that get cited there to serve the rest of the county. And I can post in chat. People want to see the site to learn more.
Yes, please. Thank
that would
you.
be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Yeah, Jacqueline, it's a different meeting than what I was talking about. This is for a candidate's campaign. So I think having, your information and whatever I learned tonight would be great to combine.
Yep. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, if Justin, if you could stop sharing your screen, I could put it back up to the agenda. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I'm just speechless from that presentation. So now the Covanta update. That's for Christine, right?
Yes, Councilmember Ruther. I know she wasn't.
Sorry, Councilmember Ruther.
Yes,
I apologize.
No, I'm here.
Sorry.
I'm here.
Councilmember
Actually, I suspect that the thing that Stephen Roots is talking about, Stephen Roots going to talk about tonight at his campaign is Covanta. So I can fill you in with probably a greater degree of accuracy than he can, because I actually sit on the Solid Waste Authority board and was at a meeting yesterday and can tell you what's going on with the Covanta contract. For people who aren't familiar with it, the Covanta contract, the Covanta facility is an incinerator located in the city of Chester. It is actually one of many air polluting industries that are in the city of Chester. I actually am far more concerned about the proposed expansion by Delcora, who hopes to double their burning of sludge, which is sludge not generated by their wastewater treatment, but sludge generated by other for-profit entities who bring it in and pay Delcora to incinerate it under their permit. People like Sunoco and transfer, that's a problem for me. And frankly, I think people would be better served by trying to stop that permit than by trying to stop the Delcora contract, or I'm sorry, the Covanta contract at this stage. But Covanta is, it's an incinerator. It definitely has emissions. Depending on who you talk to, its emissions exceed the standards that DEP has. If you talk to Circle, which is a group in Chester, it wildly fails. John Butler, who's a member of the Sierra Club and has been a longtime participant in the Chester Environmental Partnership Group, Circle is not part of that. They sort of reject the work that the Environmental Partnership Group is doing. But they have actually paid to place some monitors. They've gotten some reasonable cooperation, I understand, from Covanta. They've gotten zero cooperation from Delcora. The data that they've gotten from 2 monitors that have been installed is that the Covanta facility, which incinerates trash, is in fact in compliance with DEP standards. If you talk to Circle, what they'll tell you is that the Covanta facility was approved with exceptions to the required scrubber technologies that were needed at the time that it was built, which at this point was, I think, almost 30 years ago. I don't know if that's true or not, and it's something that I want to look at. I think there's no doubt that there is bad air quality in southeastern Delaware County. That is a given. Whether Covanta is the cause or a contributor to the cause, I don't think we know. I'm very much looking forward to having a health department in Delaware County that has authority to do more in the way of air quality monitoring to get answers to that question. And that brings me around to where we are with the Covanta contract. The contract can, notice of renewal or intent, request to renew can be given in May. I guess Covanta has to tell us that they are willing to enter into negotiations. The Solid Waste Authority is the contracting party, not County Council. The Solid Waste Authority cannot really begin negotiating until we know what the story is with a permit that is pending to expand the Solid Waste Authority's landfill in Berks County. The reason being is that the pricing that the Solid Waste Authority gets for disposing of its the trash that it incinerates at Covanta is tied to the commitment that the Solid Waste Authority has made to take the ash from the Covanta facility and the pricing for that ash disposal. Therefore, until we know that we've got the permit to expand the landfill in Berks County, we don't really know what position we're going to be in to negotiate. If things go according to plan, the permit will be granted possibly June, possibly July. The major impediments to getting that, including litigation with Berks County, have been resolved. Without that permit expansion permit rather at the landfill, Delaware County Solid Waste Authority has less than a year's worth of capacity at that landfill, assuming that all we're putting up there is ash. If we get the expansion and continue to put in ash and trash at the percentages they've been going in at, the estimated life of that extension is 10 years. If we were to go to all trash, given the fact that trash is not as heavy, but it is a lot bulkier, that expansion permit would probably give us another 3 to 4 years, if that's all we were putting up there. So the questions that the Solid Waste Authority has to look at, and I'm wearing my Solid Waste Authority hat as I talk to you, meaning I've got a fiduciary obligation to the ratepayers of the Solid Waste Authority, as well as an obligation, to our larger community. But I don't know what the impact is going to be if we're not sending the trash to Covanta and getting the disposal rates that we're getting that are partly dependent on the arrangement with the landfill. My understanding is that we get pretty good rates. If the contract expires, I think in April, either the end of this year or April, if we don't renew it, the question in my mind is, will we have enough of a grasp on what our alternatives are in order to prevent a large unanticipated price increase, especially for those municipal customers of the Solid Waste Authority who treat their trash fees as part of their tax bill. And so they bill people for it in January. If we find out this thing closes out in April and there's going to be a big jump because now we've got, we've got to truck our waste someplace else. We've got trucking fees that we've got to add. We need to build up our fleet. We need to do some other things. I mean, I don't know what is all involved in that. We would be hitting those people who are locked in with a very sizable, potentially a sizable increase in fees, potentially not. So what the Solid Waste Authority is planning to do, and I think we voted on authorizing, there was a committee formed at our meeting yesterday to look into, or not to look into, but to prepare an RFP to do a needs assessment. And the needs assessment would take a look at what our options are if we don't burn the trash, and what our options are, and how does it stack up against continuing to use the incinerator, both from a cost standpoint and trying to take a holistic look at what the impact is of going to landfill. And I know one of the things that I've been seeing in a lot of resolutions that have come in from municipalities is this idea, these zero waste resolutions that are coupled with, and you should shut down the Covanta facility. I think the zero waste resolutions are a great idea. I welcome them. But I also think people need to be realistic. We're right now at about 15% recycling of our total waste load goes to recycling. And everybody knows that one of the reasons why that number has probably come down a little bit from where it was is because the cost of recycling has gone way up. Working with Laura Goodrich Cairns and, you know, with the help of Francine Locke, you know, Councilman Schaefer and I are, I think it's fair to say, Elaine, that we're taking the lead. We're taking the lead in looking at a possible recycling operation for glass, which if we can get a sizable amount of glass out of our waste stream, it really opens up the opportunity to do a lot of things with the dumping fees, because you could effectively subsidize the disposal of the glass through this recycling mechanism through the fact that people are going to be, who choose to recycle their glass, will be by weight disposing of a lot less trash. So there's things we can do that we can then, you know, create some incentives with our tipping fees. The Solid Waste Authority, there's real interest on the part of the authority and a couple of people there to look at composting, which, if you think about it, I mean, composting is an enormous part of our residential waste stream. So my concern about turning off the Covanta contract at the end of its current term is that doesn't give us a whole heck of a lot of time to explore these solutions. We're going to be busy spending most of our time trying to make sure we've got an alternative in place to Covanta. I think there's some misinformation out there that people are saying, oh, it's a 10-year contract. We haven't had a 10-year contract with Covanta. It's been a 5-year contract that had a 5-year renewal. And my understanding from the Solid Waste Authority manager is that it was as long as that because the Solid Waste Authority wanted it that long. Covanta continues to live in hope that it will find a way to recycle its ash and do something with it that does not require it to be dumped in a landfill. And because that would be a tremendous savings for them. So finding some way of repurposing their ash. And they seem to think that they're constantly just a couple of years away from that. So they really do not want a long-term contract with Delaware County that gives us incredibly favorable rates for giving them a place to dump their ash. So I think the reality is that unless the needs assessment tells us that on a cost basis and a time to execution basis, we can get to a place by the end of this contract term where we are not going to be creating sticker shock for our customers all at once. I suspect that the forces will align to press for a shorter contract, maybe a 2-year contract, maybe a 3-year contract, maybe a 2-year contract with a couple of 1-year renewals or something. But I don't see any way that there is, I don't think at this point there's the votes on the board to not go forward. And I'm not even sure that if we got through October, which for people who follow the politics of Delaware County and closely follow the Solid Waste Authority, you will know that because of a recent resignation, the one that put me on the board, we have the opportunity to basically turn over the control of the board from a majority Republican appointed members to a majority Democratic appointed members in October. But I'm not sure, looking at the current board membership, that even that would result in people who would be prepared right now, based on what we know right now, to not renew for some period the contract, just because we've got these other things that I think we need to pursue and put in place to really be able to have a meaningful way of incenting people to reduce their waste stream. You know, not just because they want to be nice, but because it's going to be a lot cheaper if they do. And I think we're working on those, and there's some real opportunities to do that, but they're not going to materialize between now and April, while we're simultaneously putting the authority through what is a management change, because the longtime executive director and solicitor, who basically between them have run the Solid Waste Authority, are transitioning out. So it's just not going to be something that we can, I don't think we can get it all done at one time. But I'd like to point out one last thing, just because it oftentimes gets lost in the discussion. And I had this conversation with Mike Ewell, who's the proponent, you know, sort of I think he's really the policy leadership of Circle, and, you know, more on the hardcore policy, deep in the weeds information side. He's really bright. What he's telling me is if Delaware County ceases to put its trash at the Covanta incinerator, it'll shut down because they won't have enough business. I don't believe that's true. We might be, we're approximately 30% of what they're burning right now, but we are over our contractual maximum. So we're actually paying kind of a penalty rate. We're paying regular rates, not our discounted rate, on a considerable amount of the trash that we send there, because we're sending so much, and we're sending so much because there's no place for people to send their recycling. We are not the only place that's doing that. Philadelphia is doing that. New York City is doing that. And both Philadelphia and New York City have sizable contracts with the Covanta facility in Chester. So if we stop sending our trash there, I don't know that we shut it down. It's a state permitted facility. It's a privately operated. It's, you know, we're just one customer. So I put that out there for consideration. I think people need to realize we may not be the end of the line. And the one thing that I've asked the Solid Waste Authority board to think about as we do the needs assessment, as we look forward to, I think, transitioning away from that incinerator, to look at the health department. Because if everybody who believes that the incinerator is a huge part of the air quality issues down there is right, we'll know that when the health department and its environmental health unit have been in place for some period of time and have had an opportunity to look. They have oversight over solid waste. They would have oversight over the air quality. If they get a chance to pull out data that shows that it is in fact the Covanta facility that's the problem, then Covanta is going to have to make a decision of, does it want to invest in substantially upgrading emission controls, or does it want to shut down the facility? That assumes that the health department can take that information to DEP, and DEP is willing to do something with it. But what we may find is Covanta is not the problem, or Covanta is not a very big part of the problem. We may find it's Delcora or it's something else. So, but I do want to be in a position to transition the Solid Waste Authority away from the incinerator. I'll be honest, and unless the needs assessment tells us it can be done by April without a great disruption to our cost of service, my inclination is going to be to try and get a few more years at Covanta to do a transition plan and provide alternatives. So that's what I got.
Christine, can you clarify the RFP you guys passed yesterday? Was that to get somebody to help you to parse out the options, or to actually go get quotes?
The plan is to hire an environmental engineering firm to lay out the different alternatives and what the costs would be, and what the resources would be that would be required to transition. Like I said, trash is much more compact. It's fewer trucks going up to the landfill. We know where it's going. If we're not sending ash up to the landfill in Berks County and we're sending trash, we'll be sending up more trucks. There's more trucks on the road. That's a bigger carbon footprint. It's also more damage to the roads, but it's, in addition, we're going to need more trucks to be able to do that. So there's costs associated with that transition, even if the actual landfill space is proximate to where the existing landfill is. So we need to have somebody whose job it is to drill down and do this. And I did Circle was at our meeting yesterday, and they said they'd like some input into the RFP in terms of making sure we're asking, quote unquote, the right questions. I welcome their input and I welcome questions. I've had some conversations with both an environmental engineer who's on the Nether Providence EAC and a Swarthmore engineering professor who's on the Swarthmore EAC. And we've talked about, they've talked about reviewing an RFP with this, trying to make sure that we are seriously looking at waste reduction strategies. I plan to be looking at them, but as noted, I don't think looking at them and then figuring out what you need to get them all into place and then educating people about their use before you start imposing rates that incentivize certain kinds of behaviors. I don't think that's, by the time we get the needs assessment back, I really don't think that's a 7 or 8 month project. I think it's longer than that.
Do you have an estimate of what the needs assessment timeframe would be?
I don't yet. We're at this point in time, the board, believe me, this board has undergone a sea change for reasons it doesn't, I think, make sense to get into, but to be overseeing the management shift that we're overseeing, which will be a huge difference maker for the Solid Waste Authority. The fact that they're even willing to do a needs assessment is pretty remarkable. And Francine, I think one of the things that we need to talk about offline is whether does the county have questions in connection with its solid waste management plan, which has to be renewed in 2023. Does it have questions it wants to ask? I can tell you this RFP is not a budgeted expense for the Solid Waste Authority, so it may be something where we might be approaching the county to say, do you want to oversee the RFP process? Are there things you want to get answered?
I'm sure, I think that there will be, for sure, and I thank you for offering.
So that's, I can't begin to tell you what a change this is from, I think, where the Solid Waste Authority was even 3 months ago.
Can I make a couple comments?
There's a question in the chat too, by the way. I'm not sure if you can see the chat.
Yeah, that was me. If I was wondering whether the RFP or the needs assessment included an LCA, a life cycle assessment, looking at full life cycle impacts of different options.
I certainly have no problem seeking that. I think there's a balance of what the time is. We do have time. If this thing doesn't, if this thing doesn't get renewed, or if we don't make a final decision about renewal till late in the fall, I think that's not a big deal. So we do have some time, but the balancing factors are just time and expense. I would certainly like to see a long-term look, and I think that's why I was saying to Francine, I believe the county may want that, because we do have to redo our solid waste management plan.
And not just long term, but life cycle, like looking at all of the impacts of sending the waste in one direction versus another direction. Because you may find different benefits and different impacts for different options. So then it's, what do we value? What impacts are we willing to accept in order to get benefits in terms of another environmental impact? So those are the types of questions that an LCA will help to answer.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right, because that is sort of the analysis of, if you got to put more trucks on the road, if the kinds of trucks that have to handle this trash are likely to be diesel.
What are the emissions from the trucks over 20, 25 year period? How does that play into
where are they going to be going? Yes, and
climate impacts,
exactly
into the county. So I think that's one type of thing that I would recommend that you include in that, if it is not too late, or include at some point, because that's how you answer those long-term life cycle questions for waste management.
Yeah, and I know one question that was put to me by Carl Dvrpc, who's the Swarthmore engineering professor. He says, well, what about environmental justice, which we were just hearing about. I will give you the same answer that I gave him, which is who decides what's environmental justice? Because do we get to decide it? Does Circle get to decide it? Do the elected officials of Chester get to decide it? I'll tell you, the elected officials in Chester have a really tough, they're in a tough position right now. They get a sizable amount in host fees from Covanta. The county has not taken the host fees. They go to the city of Chester. So the county would be entitled to host fees as well as Chester, but Chester gets all the host fees. And that money keeps streetlights on, it pays police officers, it does a lot of other things in the city of Chester. And, you know, I was with some of the elected officials who sent letters saying, you know, please don't stop using Covanta. And I think they recognize the air quality issues, but they're also in an incredibly difficult position financially. So I think it is that question of who gets to decide what's the right thing for Chester is, especially in the absence of definitive data on whether or not it's the Covanta facility that's producing an excessive level of the air quality problems down there.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt here because I don't want to keep reiterating that question, because there are plenty of studies that show incineration, 79% of incinerators throughout the country are located in environmental justice communities. Secondly, the air quality data that is collected on in Chester really just represents certain criteria air pollutants, including ozone, particulate matter, NOx, and SOx. When you incinerate trash, you're producing a lot more toxins. I could send links for reports that show that the incinerator is responsible for 70% of the lead pollution in the air. So there is data out there, and I'm not just saying Covanta is the only one. Absolutely not. Totally agree with you there. There's plenty of facilities. They have an overburdened number of facilities that are there.
I agree.
One of many, but just to be clear, DEP just started tracking additional air quality data that relates to heavy metals, VOCs, and I believe there was one other. The report isn't available yet. I'm not sure when that's going to be available, but then there are also other toxic pollutants like dioxins that get emitted when we send plastic there to be burned as opposed to being recycled. So I just want to put that on the record because I think that is a huge factor and one that everyone should just be aware of. And happy to share some of the reports by the American Lung Association and others.
Well, understand one thing, and I see Justin Dula is still on. I mean, one thing that is really important for people to understand is the only role that the Solid Waste Authority plays in this is deciding, is it going to continue to send trash for any period of time to this facility? And, you know, again, we've got those of us on the board have a fiduciary obligation to our ratepayers, of which the city of Chester is one. So, you know, it's not like it's they're completely, I mean, they will feel a number of different impacts fiscally if we stop sending our trash there. It will reduce the host fees unless another customer comes in who's trucking trash from further away to burn it at Covanta. But I think one of the big questions is, and the real question is, what can we as a county do to make sure that we are doing exactly this kind of monitoring, and what impact will it have on the permitting of facilities like Delcora's, you know, permit request to double its incineration capacity in Chester, or the Covanta facility, which, by the way, if you change the criteria, it's a 30-year-old facility. Its life is, I think, expected to be about 40 years. So it's pretty close to the end of its life, you know. But what is DEP going to do if we start gathering that data, if we start looking at these other types of particulates and emissions, and can demonstrate adverse, that these things are tied to adverse health impacts, is the DEP going to shut it down? Because the DEP has not been a partner in shutting it down. They have not looked at the data that's been out there to shut it down.
It seems to me that all of this points in one direction, which is what kind of leverage can we exert and can we influence on the part of other parties like the city of Philadelphia and New York, perhaps, short of shutting it down, given that it does offer certain economic benefits to the region and various other things. What can we do to clean it up, to force them to as you say, the plant is 30 years old. Well, the pollution controls are 30 years old. And even if they were not marginal then, they're certainly not what's achievable now. What can we do to make that happen? Either ourselves or with the aid of state and federal governments. That seems to me to be a way forward.
Well, like I said, I would love to hear from the DEP on this, because it's a lot of pressure being put on the Solid Waste Authority right now. I could tell you, last thing, I'm sorry, I meant to mention this. The Solid Waste Authority is using its work session meeting on May 5th at 3:30 p.m. and it will be streamed. And there'll be some means for participating for public comment, but we're using it as an informational meeting where the whole board's going to get briefed about the Covanta contract, the RFP. We're going to bring people up to date on what's going on with the landfill expansion permit and kind of explain go through a more detailed description of what I tried to summarize for everybody today. And that is because Circle came to us and said they wanted to know what was going on. And we said, and like I said, this is a sea change on this board, that they're willing to have this public meeting, that they're willing to do the RFP. So I don't have any problem. And again, I'll take whatever input we can get on this RFP. If you've got a description of the life cycle analysis that you can share, please send it to Francine. She can share it with me. I'll make sure it's incorporated.
Yeah, I just want to say, I wanted to add one thing. Carol came to me and said that this was a question that came up at her local environmental group, and Christine immediately responded with, "I will be there for the Sustainability Commission meeting to discuss this." So I really appreciate your frankness, your openness, and your ability to share information with us so freely. I really appreciate that, Councilmember Ruther. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Ruther. I just want to ask you, Francine, real quick, and everyone. I think we may need to adjust the rest of our agenda. Like, we're very far behind. So maybe we should just see, we can continue to talk about this, but I just want to make sure we map out the rest of our time today, because I know we have other special guests here. So Francine, just so we know our roadmap to 8 o'clock, what do you recommend?
I recommend that we have our FCNA consultants give their presentation. I think that you guys, this will really be a very positive presentation that is needed for us to see in terms of how they're proceeding with assessing our facilities and sharing energy conservation audit information with you guys.
Okay, so we'll talk a few more minutes about Covanta, and then we'll go to our our next guest then.
Thank you.
Okay.
May I ask, and Councilwoman, this is probably a question for you. So I'm hearing conflicting information about DEP's ability to monitor the air quality around Covanta, yet you're saying that they haven't been a partner in terms of coming through with any kind of solution. Does DEP
I will say that there is one air monitor, I believe, that Covanta is required to have on its property. It is not in the stack. It is outside. Some people will tell you it's in the wrong place. I don't know enough to know if it's in the right place or the wrong place. It's in the place that they agreed to put it. And then, like I said, the Sierra Club, and I think, I don't know if it's the DEP or somebody else, has one other I think they're called purple monitors or purple air monitors that are in the vicinity.
So is it a jurisdiction issue, and perhaps does it require updated legislation? I can't remember the last time that there was sizable, sensible legislation on air quality matters from the state. Justin, do you?
Yeah, thanks. There's a lot to talk about. That's true. I can't, and I will say too, I am not the expert on air quality matters, so I can take the fact that this discussion happened, and maybe we can see if we can get folks from our air quality team to present at a future agenda, if you think that would be helpful. They can talk a lot more in specifics about the air monitoring we do. So I don't want to say too much out of turn that might be incorrect, but I believe, it's a 30-year-old facility, but they do, every time they do a permit renewal, they have to meet the newest regulations. So the regulations that they're following are not 30 years old. I believe they do have to, meet current standards as set down from EPA and the state. But again, I can work with folks in our air quality team to get more information and get the correct contacts to you. And if, next month isn't soon enough and you want sort of email answers, I can also get them in touch with you via email if you need things sooner than that.
Thank you, Justin.
Well, thank you so much, Councilperson Ruther, for being here. Thank you so much. So I guess we should move on to our next guest, FCNA, the audit.
One of our mics, perhaps?
Yes.
Mike.
Right.
Yes, thank you. Let me, I will share my screen as well, if that is okay. And we can jump in. Everybody can see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you again very much, everyone, for having us tonight. As we introduced ourselves earlier, my name is Michael Kelly. I'm the principal in charge of this project and this study on behalf of KCBA Architects. We have quite a lot of experience in the Delaware County area. Our office is up in Hatfield, and Mike and I are both local to the Philadelphia area. We wanted to share with you tonight essentially an update. We're just getting started last month with visiting some of the facilities throughout the county. We've been asked to start with the Curran building as a bit of a, where'd it go there? There we go. A pilot program to kind of say that little building right there as part of the government center, to do an initial report, come back to the committees, come back to the officials of Delaware County, and make sure that we're all focusing kind of on the right goals as we turn our attention on to many, many other buildings and facilities in the county. So the team is very large. We have ourselves, as well as Kaustiff, who you met earlier, who I'm sure will be speaking momentarily, from Bureau Veritas. They are looking at all of the technical conditions analysis of the buildings and grounds. You'll see some things later about maintenance and light switches and every mechanical widget in the building. Their analysis is very in-depth and be very helpful in future planning for your facilities. We have Hunt Engineering as a civil engineer, so they're looking at things like parking and roadways, stormwater management, kind of all things around the sites of the buildings. As well as working with us on some of the park analysis. Global Corrections Group is a group that specializes in correctional facilities. So we're looking at 3 different areas in the county: the George Hill facility, the prison area there, the juvenile detention facility. We're looking at that both, again, as a juvenile detention facility, but also the physical pieces of that building. As well as some of the secure areas, kind of the underground areas in the courthouse area, and how prisoners may be brought into the facility, provided space, secured space in the facility before going to a court hearing. So there's a couple of different things that they wanted to look at around the prison and things about security of officers and prisoners. And finally, Aero Real Estate Services looking at values of properties, property assessments, and things like that to provide some additional analysis for the county. So you've heard the acronym FCNA and Facilities Condition Needs Assessment. Well, what exactly is that? Well, it's a lot of things to be true. The first is finding out the conditions of each facility. You're going to hear a lot about that tonight, about going in and looking at the inside, the outsides, the roofs, the mechanical systems, and really providing an inventory of everything inside and outside and on the building. Making sure that we know and are providing some master planning for the future. Should this building be something that the county maintains? Should this be a building that maybe we want to move on from in the future? Cost estimates. What are the costs to repair some of those areas in the building? Should some of that equipment be replaced? Maybe it's worked past its useful life and it's time to replace certain items. So we want to make sure that you're putting good money into good decisions and not trying to repair things that really should simply be replaced, or looking at replacing things that for a lot less money could simply be repaired. Planning, we're looking at priorities of all of the plannings for the buildings, looking at planning such as sustainability efforts, long-term planning as in the programming of the site. Are the right people in this building? Should they move someplace else? Should other people occupy the space that may make county fishing more efficient? And then maintenance, working with your incredible maintenance department there in the county to come up with master planning. There's a lot to do. So if we can provide them with a list of kind of top priorities, hey, here's a few things that we saw that really should have some attention early on. And here's a few things that you should start planning for, maybe even some big ticket things like mechanical replacements or roof replacements that may be coming up 5-10 years down the road. For budgetary reasons, you have the ability to plan for that. So in the county, it's a big place, lots of buildings, lots of sites, lots of facilities, campuses, parks, things from the aforementioned prison to senior care to a voting machine warehouse, which was very cool to check out. There are a lot of places throughout the county and a variety of places that we have been asked to take a look at. So again, we're going to be looking at these things both functionally. How are the people that are utilizing these spaces working efficiently, as well as operationally? How are these buildings operating? Are there ways to improve sustainability, mechanical systems, and just make the infrastructure of the building improved? So as I mentioned, we started with the Thomas Curran building, located right behind the courthouse here. So back in March, Mike and I, along with Cowstip and his team, tore apart the building, walked around, had a very nice tour and discussion with Ms. Walker, who's the director of the Office of Domestic Relations. And our job, Mike and I, was to walk through with her to talk about functionality. How is the building working for her staff? I believe there's about 120 staff in this building. And how could we make things better for the staff? How can we make things safer for the staff? How can we make things better for the public along the way as well? This is a very public building. There's a lot of public interaction. And she was very helpful in her assessment and walkthrough of what's working well, and some things that concern her as the director of this very important department. We took a look at the building itself. We architects, we like to build models and start playing around and looking at things. So we kind of an assessment of where everybody lives in this building. This is starting down in the basement area. We have a court unit that has a lot of people working in it that are working in a basement. There's very little windows down there. They're doing a great job. There's very limited facilities, but that's a large amount of space, about 2,000 square feet just for that unit. We have the Office of Support Enforcement, about 1,200 square feet right next to them. What you may not know and what takes up a lot of space in this building is actually the holding cells for prisoners who may be having a court date or in need of speaking to somebody in the court building are housed in this area as well. So that's a large portion of this building that's taken up on more of the secure aspect of the court facilities. Upstairs where the public would enter, we have a lot of people working up here and a lot of different organizations that all support themselves, but certainly have some different functions along the way. A very small area for security, like a lot of buildings, when security and what do you call those things that you walk through? The magnet projectors, when you walk through and you're scanned when you first walk in the buildings. Those areas were retrofitted. So it's a very small area where security is. It's basically the small vestibule at the bottom of the stairs. So a very small area for security, but functioning well. A small waiting area, a singular waiting area, and that's something to note as well. They have a lot of people that may be going into a hearing room. With domestic cases, there's two sides to every case. And if there's only one small waiting room, everybody's kind of sitting together. So there were some concerns there. There's some concerns about some of the other functions that may go on in what we're kind of describing as some very cramped spaces in that building. Further upstairs, this is actually a public area as well. There's a lot of counseling that goes on in the conference on case management enforcement units. There's a lot of times where counselors and members of the public are meeting together. And, you know, again, we can get upstairs, we can get through an elevator that links all these floors, another kind of small meeting space. And again, a lot of people working on the second floor in some kind of very cramped environment. Up on the third floor, actually, the roof kind of starts to take away some of the usable space there. We have areas like the financial unit and kind of a very small training and break room. For 110 people, that's a very small area for lunches or break rooms, and certainly the training room in that area is a little small as well. So that kind of gives you an area of or an idea of who all is living in that building and who all is included in the domestic relations committee or department. So then we come back and say, okay, well, what do we think are things that we could suggest? What are things that we think are things spatially that we could analyze and come back to you for some suggestions? So we start by looking at how big some spaces should be. As I mentioned, a lot of those spaces are very small, but one of the things that's very small as well is the circulation areas. So as you can see here, the narrow corridors in between some of these cubicles. So maybe somebody has the right size cubicle, but everybody's very much on top of another. In some cases, these corridors connecting areas from one to another is less than 4 feet wide, very, very small. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of public that's walking through here. So if you're sitting at a very small cubicle space, there could be some confidentiality concerns as people may be talking on the phone or meeting with members of the public on what we might consider some sensitive issues. So again, a lot of people kind of packed in a smaller space. It's an older building, so a lot of times you end up with columns in the middle of workspaces, which can create some concerns. This is one of my favorite pictures down in the basement where this very nice lady here, who's one of the secretaries in the court department, has to slide this wall, move this wall out of the way in order to open a door to get to a mechanical space. So a lot of people, again, working in very close proximities to each other. And what we found and thought we would show as a graphic is say, well, if we draw a line and say, this is how big each one of these departments should be, and this is how much space and basically how much employees are utilizing all of these spaces, you can see where we're kind of breaking the ceiling in a lot of areas: training rooms, hearing rooms, waiting rooms, mail rooms, training facilities, administration, client information areas, and a lot of areas in this kind of Office of Domestic Relations that's a little bit larger than the space they're in. They're kind of breaking out of this tube here that we tried to create as a limit of how much space you have versus how much space you need. There's groups like the financial unit that actually has a little bit of space to give, but everybody else really is kind of bursting from the seams, and there certainly could be some additional elbow room needed in this space to assist in their day-to-day work. So while Mike and I were talking about program and spatial analysis, Kaustov and his team were crawling through all the mechanical spaces and up on the roofs and looking at things like the exterior envelope, windows, walls, insulation, the roofing. You're looking at things like mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. Are they working? Are people comfortable? How can we find ways to be a little bit more energy efficient? And like I mentioned, evaluating the exterior of the building, certainly things like moisture infiltration, which isn't, you know, the most exciting thing in the world, but that takes a heavy toll on buildings. That leads to things like mold, that leads like things indoor air quality, and certainly, you know, in the last year or so, we've become much more concerned about indoor air quality in our buildings. So with their technology, they have some great ways of kind of looking at some exterior elements of the building. This is a great thermal picture here, kind of showing some of the heat loss and some of the larger, older windows. So easily, you know, things to come back and consider are things like better window replacements and creating some additional ways to insulate some of the existing walls to provide a little less heat loss. This was back in early March, so it was still cold outside. So I thought this was a good picture to kind of show the same kind of analysis that we're going to be doing in every building. So one of the things that's brought to you guys as a deliverable is a very large report for each building, but then what's called a facilities condition index. And what that's doing is kind of ranking everything. So at the end, you're going to have 50 some buildings of areas, and you're going to go, all right, well, where do we start? And one nice thing is looking at these types of barometers to say, okay, if we put everything into a scoring system, we can score a number and say, hey, if this is something that's over a certain number, this is something that needs to be a little dealt with earlier. This is some areas that we may find are a bit more severe. So it's kind of like golf. The higher the number, the more severe, the worse off some of the conditions may be. So you're looking for lower numbers. So this is just a snippet of what Bureau Veritas will provide. And again, they have an immense amount of data, and we've already been sharing a lot with Francine and Jack and some of the guys from the facilities department of every mechanical equipment, every light switch, every light in each building, and certainly starting with the current building here, the condition of each, the cost of maintaining that of each fixture, of each mechanical equipment, what kind of savings you may find if you upgraded to a more high efficiency unit, upgraded from fluorescent lighting to LED lighting. There's certainly things that provide money savings back quicker than others. So we want to be able to show all of that. And so a lot of that data will be coming back to you guys as part of these reports as they go on and on. So you can see here on the right a little bit of things of saying, hey, here's some immediate things, but here's some things that you may be planning for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line for your long-term budgets. So as a quick summary, a few things that we found that were good. The office is in a great location. Being very close to the Fromfield building and the courthouse, there's a lot of overlap between public officials, security and staffing. A lot of the lawyers and judges, there's a lot of overlap between those facilities. So the location of this building on this campus is a good idea. The co-location of Office of Domestic Relations and Office of Support, we thought that was a nice idea. You're providing an area where not only some of these problems may be discussed, but support is there as well. And that was a kind of a nice idea of allowing those two groups to maintain a singular facility. So again, it's a lot of great things and a lot of great work that's going on there, but everybody's really kind of cramped in that building. So again, some of the good things that we saw there. And then some of the concerning things, as I mentioned, the cubicle spaces, very, very small, cramped work environments. And then, as I said, there's some concerns there regarding security, confidentiality, a lot of groups kind of working on top of one another. Some other suggestions, things like fire suppression systems, bringing that up to more of a modern building code. And a few things that we saw in the building that we did express to the maintenance facility about things like some cracked areas, some mechanical units, and drives that could be replaced. Things like drinking fountains that aren't functioning, and certainly, drinking fountains alone are things that are being replaced even before COVID, but certainly now everybody's kind of moving to water bottle filling stations. So providing some recommendations. So to end here, we thought we would share a few recommendations that we had shared with the committee for a couple of different categories. First is for your staff. Workplaces within Kern, as I mentioned, are pretty cramped, and natural daylight we think would really help. So if there's ways of providing some natural light down into the basement spaces, maybe some natural light running kind of through the core of the building, things like that, that would certainly help the staff and create a little bit of a nicer working environment. Consider replacing or relocating some program, maybe some things that could be relocated in other facilities. The holding areas, certainly in the basement there. If that could be relocated, may open up some storage space down in the basement, and some other needs of things that we thought would be beneficial for the staff. This little piece to the right here is a little bit of a diagram about creating some safe waiting spaces and some safe conference spaces for counselors and public, where they're able to meet together, but there is a little bit of a physical barrier between the two in case there's any security concerns. So recommendations for the public. As I mentioned, the fire suppression system certainly upgrades things for fire safety. Reconsidering the first floor waiting area, as I mentioned, having one small space where you may have a lot of people that are there for conflicting purposes, let's say. So maybe there's a space to create some additional separate areas, some areas for finance, where people may be coming into the building to pay a check, pay something that they are owing to the county. And having to kind of go upstairs and work their way through the building may be something that could be reconsidered. We did think wayfinding, which is basically just signage in the building, would certainly help the public. It's a very condensed site, or a very condensed building on multiple floors. So having maybe it's just some signage of, okay, I go pay my check upstairs, or okay, that waiting area for me is down the hall and around the corner, could certainly help as well. And oftentimes that kind of one-stop shop desk of a help desk can certainly help the efficiency there. And the third thing we were looking at, what can we do for your staff? What can we do for the public? What can we do for the environment? And there's quite a few things that we examined here as well. Looking at building management systems, there's a great way now to be able to control that from anywhere. You're able to, very similar to say your thermostat at home, you can change the air conditioning from your phone. Being able to do that from building management systems is a great way to manage the building. It also allows you to reduce some of the operating hours of those systems when spaces aren't occupied. So kind of, again, similar ideas of what we may do in our homes are things that we would advocate for in our workplaces as well. Easy things like low flow fixtures, low flow water for conservation purposes. LED lighting, there's retrofits in the old fluorescent ballast, but there's also great programs now where you can essentially switch out LED lighting for the old fluorescent lighting, and an immense amount of potential savings there. So where do we go from here? This is our first update to this committee. We're certainly happy to do this more regularly. We've started our parks tour this week, and heading into the courthouse for the other buildings as we continue to move on to the study. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of buildings, so we're using up the spring and into the summer to kind of go site by site and building by building to come back with needs assessments and some recommendations for all of these buildings as we go on. So any discussion there, any questions about things that you saw, anything that you think we should be focusing on more in these studies?
Thank you, Mike. I just want to ask really quickly. We didn't have a point where we could ask for public comment, and I feel like we should do that at least now. Is anyone checking public comment? And is there any public comment?
I have the public comment and I have not seen any come in.
Okay, great.
Double checking again, and yes, indeed, there has been nothing come in.
Okay, great. I'm glad we checked. So we only have about 5 minutes left. So I guess if any of us have any questions, if you want to unshare your screen so we can all see each other, that may be helpful.
I just want to add, Carol, that that the one thing that was not shown, and they really didn't toot their own horn with this, KCBA, is the energy conservation measure report that you guys put together. It was phenomenal, and I wish I would have had more. There's so much more to share here, but there's just not enough time.
And I figure at our next meeting, I know we had to skip some things in the agenda. We'll give everyone more time for their subgroup reports, and all of you have in the handouts, you know, the reports from each of the subgroups. And Francine, I don't know if these meetings ever go past 8, but I have another professional meeting at 8, so I can't stay past 8.
Understood. No, I think, yeah, to respect everyone's time, I think we should end it at 8.
Yeah, but so we had to adjust the agenda, but we have a couple minutes left if anyone has any questions for Mike.
I have a quick question, Michael. You mentioned sustainability as part of the assessment that you're doing when you systematically. What does that mean? Obviously, you know, fixing a broken VFD and LED would be, you know, would be standard. What are you specifically looking at and recommending in terms of sustainability?
I'll give a brief answer, and then I'll turn that over to Kaustiv, because I think that's a big focus of their piece. Yeah, I mean, there's the simple things, as we mentioned, but there's the longer term, bigger pieces as well. You know, looking at a lot of the facilities, when you think about the Fair Acres site, there's a lot of buildings there that are very old, very outdated, using central steam plants to heat their buildings and cool their buildings as well. So from the smaller little pieces to the much larger plant facilities needs, the assessment and the evaluation coming back with recommendations and the potential cost savings are going to cover, as I mentioned, from light bulbs all the way down to central steam plants to solar power as well. So Kaustiv, do you want to give a brief piece of what your focus is from Bureau Veritas?
Your mic's off, Kaustiv.
Sorry. Thank
and
you,
we
Mike.
only have 2 minutes, so it's good.
So I'll wrap. Mike, you were perfectly on point. The focus over here is purely energy and water conservations, and how can we help the county reduce the carbon footprint, right? Sustainability can be viewed from various angles, but when we look from the building perspective, the key over here is buildings are the highest pollutant in a county. And so if you can make your buildings efficient, knowing very well your buildings are old, how can you make them more efficient? That will not only help your carbon footprint, but also help your taxpayer costs, right? How much money are you spending? You have old infrastructure being supported because there's not sufficient funding to build a new one. And that's where KCBA and we are working together to identify what can be saved and what should be declared that, hey, let's not put any more money in it and potentially try to build something new, which is more efficient and better. So that's how we are looking at sustainability. Does that kind of help answer your question?
So we have only a minute left. We really appreciate you being here, Mike, and all of you from KCBA.
Yes, I agree. And there's so much more to share about that piece of sustainability and the energy conservation. The commercial grade audit that they're doing is amazing. So maybe next time we'll have just that piece discussed if we agree to. Anyway, we do have to end this. Carol, do you want to?
Just, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make that motion, Ed McGargy.
Thank you, Ed McGarty. Would someone like to second?
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, so moved. Our meeting's adjourned and it's right at 8 o'clock. Thank you so much and
Good night.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you next month. Bye.
Care.
Bye, everyone.